a brand then generate value? So there are two aspects of brand value. One, which is the physical net assets, and the second one is in relation to brand equity. And this is where the branding process comes into play. So the elements of the brand equity, is in relation to awareness, associations, perceived quality, brand assets, and brand loyalty. So again, these have become something which have evolved over the past few years and become a focal point where brand management is concerned. And how do these brand association network apply? Well, a lot of the brands are using these levers in terms of attributes, visual images, users, benefits, values, and products as a way to basically create that brand association network. And it has compounded, especially over the past few years. So here's the first question, which I like to ask all of you, and please feel free to put your answers in the chat box. So we talked about the most valuable brands. We're talking about the physical net assets and also the brand equity. In 2023, there are a list of the 10 most valuable brands in 2023. Can I get you all to guys put up one or two brands which you think fall into this particular list, the most valuable brands in 2023? So give you 10 seconds to basically put that. Okay, so it looks as though many of you are moving in the right direction. In 2023, these are the list of the top 10 most valuable brands. And again, the valuable brands are based upon the physical net assets and the construct of brand equity. 7 of these brands are from the United States. The number 6, Samsung, is from South Korea, and we have 2 brands, ICBC and TikTok, from China. So ICBC is a bank, and you all are familiar with TikTok. But these are the brands that basically constitute the 10 most valuable brands in 2023. And it's ironic because about 10 years ago, only 10 years ago, Coca-Cola was in the top ranked brand. And only in the past few years, these have been overtaken by the tech giants. If you look at this particular chart, you will see also the most valuable brands in relation to the regions. So if you look at Amazon, they're most valued in the Americas. T-Mobile, which is not in the top 10 here, is very highly valued in Europe. Aramco, which is a world's largest oil producer, is in the Middle East. And then Samsung is in Asia. So that is basically the most valuable brands. But again, over the past few years, there has been also an emphasis on what they call a brand strength index. So if you look here, the brand strength index is basically calculated in terms of its rating. So there's a AAA rating for Google in the Americas. Swisscom and Etelachat are both communication companies. Swisscom is from Switzerland, with a brand strength index of 91.7, dominating Europe. Etelachat in Middle East, and then WeChat with a AAA rating in Asia. So the emphasis, again, the differentiation between the two, one is of value, the other one is in terms of their strength index. And again, these are the areas of the brand strength index which relate to brand inputs, brand equity drivers, and brand-related business performance. And as mentioned before, post-pandemic, there has been an emphasis in these specific areas. And those of you who are in marketing will understand that the example measures here need to be managed in a way to be able to develop that brand strength index. So the brand strength index, which I was referring to, has been again the focal point of brands today. Going back to the aspect of global branding, remember the actual 3 characteristics that are highlighted here, and also in terms of the brand structure. So over the past few years, there is also a chart that basically highlights the world's fastest growing brands. And if you look at this particular chart here, it basically uses the brand structure using the characteristics that are highlighted here, and also embeds parsimony, consistency, and connectivity. And if you look at the world's fastest growing brands in 2023, you'll see that BYD is number 1. So those of you who are not familiar with BYD, it is a vehicle company selling vehicles. And in the past year, or this year itself, is nominated as number 1. The remaining, and this is followed by Maersk, which is a logistics company in Denmark, LinkedIn, Tesla, ADP is in payroll and HR system provider in Australia. There's United Airlines, which is the world's largest city of Europe, Norway. So they've become the fastest brand of fastest the so let's just go back to the global process of today. And again, these are things which have been collated over years of leveraging the brand's power is for companies to consider 3 aspects. 1, aggregation, which is basically the heart and soul of every company's brand. So we're talking about the core essence of what the brand stands for. Adaptation, so expressing the brand messages in words, images, and music. And then arbitrage, focusing on generating revenue by exploiting the discrepancy in prices across markets and media. So these 3 areas have, again, post-pandemic, played a key role in terms of how brands are leveraging their power. And one of the key things that has also happened over the past few years is the allowance that are being made in terms of the flexibility in execution. So here, what is important is the fact that the smallest differences in different markets, whether it's consumer preferences, habits, or underlying cultures, can actually make or break the brand's global success. So again, the brand strategy process, the steps that are being captured in terms of the brand heart, the brand messaging, and the visual identity is all capturing or all being captured by the fact that these are the processes that are being applied in today's context. Global brand communication today also is about orchestrating what we call the consumer touch points. So if you are aware of the actual process where you take the customer through their purchase journey, you go from awareness to loyalty, but along the way, the levers that need to be embedded are highlighted here in terms of the consumer touch points. So this is, again, the process that's involved and has taken a big step in terms of making sure that there's greater investments that are being put behind putting together this process. So today, what are consumers looking for? when considering a global brand. And again, this has shifted based upon what has happened during the pandemic. So the three areas that basically consumers want to be involved is in terms of characteristics that has quality signal, reasonable prices, new products, consistent guarantees, and dynamic nature. And 4% of consumers today rely solely on this principle. The second part is in terms of global adaptation, where the brands are able to address the symbols of cultural ideals, which I have a couple of examples for. From a percentage standpoint, 12% of global consumers rely on this as a means of brand preference. And one of the things that has happened exponentially is in terms of the characteristics of the brand having social responsibility. 8% of people use this as a deciding factor in their brand choices, and consumers expect brands to use their vast influence for the greater good. So if you look at the awards that have been won by global brands, the area of social responsibility, inclusivity, and diversity have taken a front seat in terms of how they connect with consumers. So these three factors reign supreme in the overall perception of global brands. And one of the things that basically evolves where global branding is concerned in terms of the process is understanding the environment. And the environment are highlighted in these 8 bullet points: culture, competition, consumer behavior, politics, technology, demography, and literacy and economic factors. And one of the areas in terms of culture, going back to the global adaptation in terms of addressing various symbols and cultural ideas, is the area of religion. And I wanted to kind of focus on religion because these are one of the key things that will demonstrate how brands were able to be flexible and tailor their messages accordingly, according to the market itself. One of the areas which has been a key component is in terms of Islamic branding. So Islamic branding, Islam being the second largest religion around the world, talking about brands that meet product and service needs, meeting things which are Sharia compliant, following Islamic requirements, either in organization practices, branding features, and this is their way to basically ensure consumer trust and confidence. So again, going back to the aspect of global adaptation, addressing cultural ideals, here is a print global campaign which basically expands on the idea of adapting to cultural ideals. So if you see the first one, which is in the Western world, you see that the actual messaging in execution is very similar, but in Saudi Arabia, where Islam is the dominant country, the dominant religion, they had to basically change the execution to adapt to the market itself, being a little bit more conservative in the market orientation. This is in my country, so we all are maybe very familiar with the halal logo, and Colgate, as part of their product development, incorporated the halal logo or made the actual toothpaste halal in terms of the certification. And this again was able to connect with consumers, knowing the fact that a brand like Colgate was able to cater to the needs and wants of Muslims. So the line here says, Jake memperakui ubat gigi Colgate yang disahkan halal oleh badan Islam yang diiktiraf oleh Jakim. So the Islamic authorities officially outlines and makes that association of the use of halal in Colgate. And this is a print ad that was developed to reinforce their cultural understanding to the market in Malaysia. Saudi Arabia, there's a strict ruling in Saudi Arabia during the month of Ramadan where you cannot advertise food. And what McDonald's did in Saudi Arabia was to basically promote the brand, but again, keep it within the confines of the rules and regulations. So what the company did was created an iftar sand clock, which was a virtual live hourglass that counts down the time until iftar each day, which is the breakfast. And that's when the time that McDonald's are able to be selling their products again. So again, respecting the rules of not being able to advertise food, but using a creative aspect to be able to work within the confines of the rules and regulations of the country. If everybody is aware of Nike's proposition is about aspiration. And in the countries of Russia, Turkey, and the Middle East, the issue with regards to sport, women in sport, there is the aspect of gender discrimination, where different cultural customs and individual society aspects make it hard for women to mingle with sports. So one of the questions that are normally being asked to women who want to participate in sports is, what will they say about you? So these are the questions. This is a question that many young Arab females are challenged with at home. So women are met with this phrase, experience social criticism, and encounter negative attitude both from family and friends when they want to try something unexpected. So this ad basically taps into, again, the things that we talked about earlier in terms of adapting the brand to cater to the issues that the market faces. And it reinforces the Just Do It campaign in terms of empowering women in the countries Russia, Turkey, and the Middle East. So just have a quick look at the campaign. The next campaign is in relation to shampoo commercials. So the cliche of shampoo commercials is to depict hair and look at the actual benefits that the shampoo provides with look at the benefits that the shampoo provides. And the situation in Malaysia is that many Muslim women wear hijabs. So rather than having the cliche strategies, the cliche messages of what the shampoo can do for you, Sunsilk put together a campaign which again taps into the concept of what we talked about before, adapting to the cultural norms and relating something which is a message of empowerment, again, similar to what Nike did. So just let's have a look at how Sunsilk was able to promote their shampoo, avoiding those normal cliche strategies that shampoo commercials are known for. So the strategy that Sunsilk used was very compelling. It resonated well with the market itself, and strategy became a movement for Sunsilk where attitudes and behaviors were changed. So again, a way of tailoring messages to suit the market using the aggregation, adaptation, and arbitrage characteristics, focusing on the flexibility that was talked about earlier. So this is where we've seen a movement over the past few years towards these sorts of initiatives. So the three factors that we talked about earlier in terms of the brand structure talks about underlying market dynamics. And as many of you are familiar, the pandemic in 2019 created many challenges for brands where communication is concerned. So if I were to ask you all a question in terms of how the consumer, we're talking the markets where consumers are faced with, because during the post-pandemic, during the pandemic and post-pandemic, people have changed the way they live, the way they work, and the way they socialize, right? And I wanted to kind of preface this particular question to you because brands have to adapt and apply and communicate during this time. So if you're talking about how consumers have changed the way they live, work, and socialize, what would be some of the key things that you have noticed, or even you yourself have experienced during the pandemic? Let you to put your answers in the chat box. How has the pandemic changed the way you live, work, and socialize? Just put in a sentence and tell me what are the most drastic changes that were made during the pandemic for you as a consumer. What has the pandemic, what were the changes that you experienced as a consumer resulted in? People have talked about shopping online, which is, again, things which I'm sure you've experienced firsthand. Alifa talks about being health conscious. Many of you seem to be avid online shoppers. Lots of comments of online shopping. Okay. So I'll just outline a couple of things which happen in terms of the market and consumers during the pandemic. So if you look here, 95% of consumers have made at least one change in their lifestyle, right? And as highlighted by many of you in the chat box, online shopping, online purchases for products such as food, home decor, fashion, luxury goods, increased by 343%. So if I just give you a bit of a snapshot. So e-commerce purchases, increase of 333% for food and cooking at home. Buying alcoholic beverages, again, 300% mark. Home and decor, apparel and footwear, consumer electronics, takeout food, personal care, DIY tools, and luxury goods. You see purchases increased by over 300%, and that's in the online space. So that's one. The other one, and as a result of the online e-commerce space, China, which basically accounts for almost half, 46% of the world's total consumer shopping, increase their e-commerce area. The popularity of live streaming has also revolutionized online shopping. And currently, the actual e-commerce market in China is about 60 billion. So much so that even one influencer, Via, sold more than $4.5 billion worth of sales through her live stream channel last year alone. So that's in the area of online shopping. The other area which made an impact is what they call a third space. So 79% of actual consumers would like to work from home or a location other than their home or workplace. And this one had quite a bit of impact because we're talking about more than half that said that they would be willing to pay up to US $100 per month out of their own pockets to work from a cafe, bar, hotel, or retailer with a dedicated space. So the implications of this highlights a potential opportunity to grow revenue for the hospitality and retail industries. If you look at the last statistic here, 46% will either not travel at all for work or reduce their business travel by half following the pandemic. So what has happened is that the pandemic has alluded to is that they've forced what they call creative pragmatism, especially for travel and hospitality. So some hotels turn rooms into pop-up restaurants, while others experimented with offering temporary office space to customers seeking a third space to work. So that's how the pandemic has affected the lifestyles of consumers. And during the pandemic, obviously, everybody was staying at home. And a couple of companies had to still reach out to consumers to keep themselves top of mind. So what Thai Airways did with this particular campaign, which is called Stay at Home, was they actively encourage people to not travel by rewarding those who remain safely separated from others at home. So with their technology, or what they call geolocation technology, users were able to prove that they stayed put while earning actual redeemable miles. So you're given frequent flyer mile points when you stay at home more. So that's one of the messages that Thai Airways did. And this particular campaign earned quite a bit of news in terms of how brands were able to connect with the consumers during the pandemic. So just have a look at the actual campaign.
Last night, Thailand's Prime Minister announced a national curfew.
So a great strategy by Thai Airways to keep in connection with the consumers during the pandemic. This particular campaign won multiple awards for its relevancy and also in terms of its ideation. The other campaign, which I thought I'll kind of highlight to you, was something in similar lines, because during the time of the pandemic, Uber, people were not able to take the ride-sharing companies, ride-sharing transport. So Uber, again, keeping the brand top of mind, initiated this particular campaign and primarily thank its customers for not riding on Uber. So a company that moves people is asking you to not move. So this was developed in 2021, where it was a public service announcement style campaign urging riders to help save lives and end this virus by staying at home. So it's not really every day that a company thanks people for not using its services, but during this pandemic, Uber basically recognized how important it is to do their part. And this is why Uber, with the help of its drivers, couriers, and restaurant partners, even committed to providing 10 million rides and food deliveries to healthcare workers, seniors, and people in need all around the world. So it was, again, a wonderful strategy that was put together by Uber, taking into consideration the market dynamics of the pandemic, keeping the brand top of mind, putting across a public service style announcement. Going again in terms of the second quality of cultural ideas and having a global adaptation. We know that over the past few years, there has been an amalgamation of technology, creativity, and data, which is forming the new coin of equilibrium. So the global adaptation here is in the use of technology. And this has seen, again, a rapid increase in the way how technology is being used to communicate to consumers as part of global brand management. This is further reinforced through an article in the literature talking about the rise of new technologies in marketing. And it feeds back into, again, how brands are being managed today. Because the article basically talks about communications today, where technology will influence how information reaches consumers, who seeks out influence on who seeks out the information, and it will influence on how or where places where information can be gathered. And many companies of today were basically asked which of the technologies that is expected to be the most important. And this is a question which was raised in 2019, but it's still applicable for today, where you see artificial intelligence making inroads as part of the process that I was talking about, as part of the use of technology where brands are leveraging. So technology is disrupting the way consumers interact with brands in the moment of a consumption, and artificial intelligence is looking at making quite an inroad where technology planning is concerned. So where are the areas of artificial intelligence where these brands are leveraging? You're talking about proactive AI-driven solutions, where it helps guide, remind, and present consumers with personalized solutions and products. Voice assistants and voice interactions have become something which is, again, an area where brands are able to connect with consumers. And there will be an arms race where they determine which AI solutions will bond best with consumers. And this is, again, the area where a lot of brands are taking the forefront in leading that process. Within that, there's also the aspect of influencer marketing. And we know currently where influencers play a role as bloggers, vloggers, where they are able to shape consumer opinions. And internet users are there because they are more willing to trust recommendations from a favorite YouTube creator rather from a brand. And as a result, brands are using more influencers and engaged opinion leaders as it brings measurable results. So the concept of influencer marketing has also taken a rise in terms of the planning. And as part of the global branding, it has become a social force. So here's the last question in terms of your understanding of who the top global influencers in social media are. So these are based upon Twitter and Facebook followers, Twitter and Instagram followers. If any of you can name the top 3 global influencers in social media around the world today, please put your answers in the chat box. The number 1 global influencer is actually in sports. So I'll give you a hint of who that number 1 person is. In sports. Okay, so some of you have actually identified the number 1 global influencer in social media, and he has been the number 1 for the past 3 years, right? So as of 16th of April 2023, Cristiano Ronaldo, again, based upon Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter followers, 848 million, followed by Messi, Selena Gomez, Justin Bieber, Kim Kardashian, Kylie Jenner, Dwayne Johnson, Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande, and Katy Perry. Lionel Messi and Katy Perry do not have Twitter accounts, but these who are in the top 10 have been in the top 10 for the past 3 years, and with the exception of Cristiano Ronaldo, who has dominated the number 1 spot, whereas everybody else has kind of shifted in their rankings. And the reason why I put this up was because, again, brands in today's context, in some brands rely heavily on social influencers, social media influencers as part of their brand development and brand equity development process. I wanted to also highlight that because in the past 3 years, there has been an influx of the usage of virtual influencers. And With the advent of virtual influencers, it has become a $22 billion industry. At this point in time today, 17% of organizations and companies devote more than half of their annual budgets to influencer marketing, where virtual influencers has started to become something which is a more common occurrence. Influencer marketing, 70% of sales are made through influencer marketing. And in terms of virtual influencers, they're able to have complete control over their brand identity. Again, remember, brand identity builds, again, part of what the brand equity outline before was highlighted, because there are no physical or technical limitations, and with many of you are aware, less controversial risk. So if I were to highlight the top 10 virtual influencers, you'll see highlighted here. And these are starting to make inroads because of the power of using virtual influencers. So Ludo Magalu is number 1, Little Michaela number 2, Barbie number 3, Gogimon number 4, and Annie Malu number 5. And I'll just give you a bit of an overview of the power of using virtual influencers. So Ludo Magalu, 14.6 million followers on Facebook, 6 million followers on Instagram, 2.6 million followers on YouTube, right? The fame and reach is mostly limited to Brazil, where she originates. She actually made an appearance a decade ago on specific magazines, and has since been featured in product reviews, unboxing videos, and shared software tips on behalf of retail giants. Hugo Boss, which many of you should be familiar with, have Ima on the right and Nobody Sausage as their virtual influencers, so they're brand ambassadors. And this was launched as part of their spring and summer 2022 campaign. The actual Hugo Boss brand is splitting into 2 identities, Hugo and Boss. And this is their attempt to generate awareness amongst the Gen Z and millennials. Okay, so Hugo Boss has their virtual influencers. Puma also has Maya, which was created in 2022, representing the Southeast Asian region. They use a social media AI platform that mapped millions of faces in Southeast Asia from multiple online sources. So this one has also a great following. We're talking also about Little Michaela, who is currently the most famous of all virtual influencers. Time magazine named her among the 25 most influential people on the internet in 2018. Little Michaela endorses Prada, Dior, Calvin Klein. Their followers are dubbed as Michaelites, she has 3.6 million TikTok followers, 31,000 Twitter followers, or X as is now being called. And this was created by a startup brand in Los Angeles. So another very, very influential virtual influencer. South Africa has Shudu, who made her debut in 2017. One of the best-known Asian metaverse influencer on social media is Rosie Oh. Made an appearance in 2020. And then India has their first virtual. Currently 100,000 their followers and rapidly climbing. So again, the use of virtual influencers, going back to the concept of the characteristics that were highlighted earlier in today's planning process, they play a key role. Global branding in terms of media platforms and implications, as many of you are familiar, the media landscape has fragmented, mutated, and diversified. So global branding today has to take into consideration these factors, because going back to the brand structure, it's about making sure there are underlying market dynamics that need to be attended to, and the brand structure of connectivity, how do you best reach your consumers, needs to be factored in. So various elements, various platforms need to be considered. And if you look at just the daily time spent with media in 2023, you will see from a global standpoint, the internet has about 6 hours of consumers spending about 6 hours, broadcast 3 hours, social media 2 hours, press media, which is supposedly a platform which has seen a drop, still has about 1 hour, 49 minutes. People spending time on it. Music's there. Game console is there, and radio is also there. So it just gives you a bit of a perspective from a global standpoint, because when you're looking at connectivity and when you're looking at reaching out to consumers, these are some of the stats and these are some of the considerations that need to be put in place as part of your brand planning strategy process. Social media, something which, again, I probably would not need to let you know, but there are a high number of active social media users, which is about 42% of the total population. And many of them are actually using mobile. So social media, digital marketing has also been a key component which has seen growth in the past few years. Having said that, though, I'd just like to kind of highlight and give you a bit of a perspective in terms of the use of social media, because there is only a certain percentage of the world which has access to the internet. So if I were to ask you what percentage of the world today has internet access, just place your answers in the chat box. I'll give you 10 seconds to put your answers there. What percentage of the world today has access to the internet? Okay, so some varied figures highlighted. Some are correct, some are also a little bit far off from the actual number. The actual percentage of the world that has access to the internet today is about 64%, which some of you have answered correctly. But I wanted to just highlight this because I think there is the assumption that using digital marketing, using social media would mean that brands can connect with customers around the world. And that's not really true. I mean, if you look at 2013, right? Even in 2013 alone, only 30% of the world had access to the internet, right? So if this has evolved to double 10 years later, but at this point in time, only 64% of the world has access to internet. So where global branding is concerned and where connectivity is concerned, other platforms would need to play a greater role, especially when there is no internet connection. So if you look at just some statistics around the world, so 26% of the world doesn't have access to the internet. And the more likely regions are in Southern Asia, Eastern Asia, and even in Western Africa. So so we're talking about global branding. So the areas of the characteristics that I talked about earlier before, the areas in terms of parsimony, adaptation, aggregation, arbitrage, and connectivity. When you're planning and executing brand messages, social media is a good factor, but it cannot be the only factor that is considered when you're talking to consumers. Last question, because we're talking about social media platforms. The top 3 most popular social media platforms. All right, some of you have their fingers on the pulse in terms of understanding the context of social media. So this is again from a worldwide standpoint. Facebook is number one, YouTube is number two, WhatsApp is number three, followed by Instagram and WeChat. And I think it's significant and it's important to us just understand the context of this as a social media platform, because remember, one of the key characteristics of how global brands are managed today is how you connect with consumers, and understanding their social media habits is key as part of the brand planning process, even in the context of search engine marketing, right? So everybody is aware that Google is number one, but if you look at the remaining search engine market share, Bing is there, Yahoo is there, DuckDuckGo is there, all from the US, Yandex is from Russia, Baidu is from China, right? So the context of the search engine plays also a role in terms of connectivity and in terms of reaching out to customers. And you're talking about even messenger apps. So WhatsApp is number one, WeChat is number two, Facebook Messenger is number three. It's ironic because Facebook actually owns WhatsApp, right? But in many cases, if you look at the growth of WhatsApp and how brands are playing a role, you will see a greater impetus in terms of brands making a presence in these key messenger apps as a way to connect with you as a consumer. The next slide here just talks about the significance of WeChat. So those of you who are in China probably are aware of the implications and significance of brands making a presence. Every time a brand makes a presence in a country like China, they cannot factor out WeChat as a platform. And this basic video highlights the significance of the use of WeChat in China.
Privacy concerns with this sensitive content is monitoring.
So brands like WeChat and TikTok obviously have challenges ahead of them, because in many countries, these are looked upon as brands which have issues in regards to privacy and privacy of data. And it is incumbent upon the brands to basically address these as part of their brand um, identity development. So the last two slides here basically kind of sums up again some of the context of what we had discussed, because global branding is really about planning on how the brand wants to be perceived. In today's context, there is that brand structure, which is shaped by the three characteristics which were highlighted earlier. And if you look at the trajectory of how the brands create value, the aspects of parsimony, consistency, and connectivity has been, I guess, the key driving factors that has led to these brands generating increased value and brand equity. Today, the aspect of aggregation, adaptation, and arbitrage strategies are playing a key role in terms of global branding. And key is in terms of the flexibility in execution, because the smallest differences in different markets can play a role in terms of developing that brand. So again, what I've covered today is just a bit of a snapshot of some of the workshops and lectures that we cover, which is ingrained in our units. If you're a student, you'll be able to be exposed to all these as part of what we capture. And we're proud of basically aligning our units in line with the professional practice. So hopefully you're able to kind of get a bit of a sneak peek in terms of how global brands are being managed today. I'll open up for questions. If there's any of you who have any questions in relation to any of the content that was covered, I'm happy to answer them. You can actually put up a question in the chat box, or unmute your microphone and ask the question, and I'm happy to expand or elaborate. Any questions? Okay, so no questions. I thank you for attending our webinar for today. As mentioned earlier, it's basically capturing snapshots of what have been collated over the past 2 years in terms of how global brands have been managed. We're using a lot of what is embedded in the literature and also in terms of the professional practice. And again, it's things that we basically use as part of our teaching in our units. And this basically is in relation to our global branding unit. Just a quick request here, because this was something that was asked by me. If you're a student from Benos University, can I get you to scan the QR code here as evidence of attendance to this webinar? So please, if you can bring out your mobile phones, scan the QR code so that we'll have a record of your attendance to this webinar. So I'll just leave that up there for the next 1 minute. And if you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to ask. All right. So this comes to the end of the webinar. Hope that you are able to acquire or learn a couple of things in terms of the aspects of global branding of today. I hope to maybe see you in future guest lectures and webinars. Thank you very much for attending. Take care.